Elara Quinn sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, the quiet ticking of a clock the only sound in the room. The desk before her was cluttered with the remnants of her journey: dusty tomes, faded maps, and ancient artifacts, each a fragment of the mysteries she had unraveled over the past months. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, there was a weight in the air, a tension that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. On her laptop screen, a glowing symbol pulsed ominously, a complex, ancient rune that seemed to radiate its own dark energy. She had seen this symbol before, in her dreams, in the shadows of the place she had visited, and now, it was here, demanding her attention. Elara's heart raced as she stared at the symbol, her thoughts a whirlwind of fear and resolve. "I've encountered many strange and terrifying things in my journey," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the silence of the room. "But nothing has prepared me for what I'm about to face. This symbol isn't just a mark from the past, it's a message, a warning of something dark that's been awakened. And now, it's coming for me." Elara knew she had no choice. The time for research, for careful planning, was over. The darkness was no longer something she could investigate from the safety of her apartment. It was here, and it was closing in. Quickly, she grabbed her camera gear and journal, stuffing them into her worn leather backpack. As she did, her eyes fell on a small, weathered photograph of her parents, tucked into the corner of her desk. They had been the ones who first sparked her curiosity about the supernatural, and now, in some way, she felt their presence more strongly than ever. Taking the photo, she slipped it into her jacket pocket. "This ends tonight," she said, more to herself than to anyone else, her voice filled with a quiet determination. Elara stepped out into the night, the chill of the evening air biting at her skin. The streets were eerily empty, and the only sound was the distant rumble of thunder, a storm brewing on the horizon. She knew where she had to go, an old, abandoned church on the outskirts of town, a place long forgotten by the living but never truly deserted. The church loomed ahead of her, a dark silhouette against the stormy sky. It was a relic of a bygone era, its once majestic structure now crumbling and overgrown with vines. The wooden door hung loosely on its hinges, creaking softly in the wind. The place reeked of decay and despair, and Elara could feel the weight of its history pressing down on her. As she approached, the air grew colder, and she could sense the presence of something watching her from the shadows. The townspeople had abandoned this place decades ago, after a series of unexplained deaths that had left the community in fear. They had whispered of curses, of dark rituals conducted in secret. But none of those rumors had ever been confirmed until now. Elara pushed open the heavy door, the sound echoing through the empty halls like a ghostly wail. Inside, the church was a shadow of its former self. The pews were broken and rotting, the stained glass windows shattered, leaving only jagged edges where once there had been vibrant scenes of angels and saints. Dust hung thick in the air, stirred by her movements, and the floor creaked ominously underfoot. At the far end of the church, partially hidden in the darkness, stood a massive stone tablet. It was ancient, covered in dust and cobwebs, but even from a distance, Elara could see the faint glow of the rune carved into its surface, the same symbol that had haunted her for weeks. "This is it," she thought, her breath catching in her throat. "The place where it all began. The veil between our world and the next is thinnest here, and tonight, it's going to tear open completely." Steeling herself, Elara approached the tablet. The closer she got, the stronger the sense of dread that filled the air. The low, ominous hum she had felt earlier was now a full-fledged vibration, shaking the very walls of the church. It was as if the building itself was alive, pulsing with the dark energy emanating from the rune. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, and Elara could see her breath misting in the air. The shadows around her seemed to come alive, swirling and shifting like a living entity. From the darkness, ghostly figures began to emerge, some she recognized from her past investigations. Others were more terrifying and unknown, their forms twisted and grotesque. The figures circled her, their whispers filling the air with an eerie, disembodied chorus. The voices were faint at first, barely audible, but they grew louder, more insistent, until they were a cacophony of overlapping words. "You should not have come here, Elara Quinn," one voice hissed, its tone filled with malice. Alara's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stand her ground. She had faced spirits before, but this was different. These entities were not simply lost souls, they were something darker, something far more dangerous. Clutching a talisman in one hand and a small vial of sacred water in the other, she prepared herself for what was to come. "I know what you are," she said, her voice trembling slightly but filled with resolve. "You've been feeding off the fear and suffering of this town for decades. But tonight, it ends." As if in response, the shadows converged in the center of the church, coalescing into a towering, spectral figure. Its form was indistinct, a shifting mass of darkness, but its eyes glowing with a malevolent light were all too real. The air crackled with energy, and the very ground beneath Alara's feet seemed to tremble as the figure took shape. The voice that emanated from the figure was a deep, guttural growl, filled with ancient, otherworldly power. "You are too late, Seeker," it rumbled, the sound reverberating through the walls of the church. "The veil is ours now. Your world will fall." Elara took a deep breath, her mind racing. She knew she had to act quickly. This was the moment she had been preparing for. Raising the talisman high, she began to chant an incantation in a language long forgotten by most of the world. The worlds were ancient and powerful, passed down through generations of seekers who had fought to protect the world from the darkness that lurked just beyond the veil. As she chanted, the air around her grew heavy with energy. The spectral figure howled in rage, its form twisting and contorting as it tried to break free from the binding spell. The shadows around it writhed and lashed out, but Elara held her ground, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her insides. With a swift motion, she uncorked the vial of sacred water and poured it over the stone tablet. The water sizzled and smoked as it made contact with the glowing rune, the light flickering wildly as the ancient power within the tablet was disrupted. "I banish you back to the shadows," Elara cried out, her voice filled with authority. "You have no power here." The spectral figure let out a final, deafening scream, its form disintegrating into wisps of smoke that were quickly sucked back into the tablet. The rune flickered one last time before fading completely, leaving the church in an eerie, unnatural silence. Elara collapsed to her knees, her strength finally giving out. She was exhausted, her body trembling from the effort of the ritual, but she had done it. The darkness had been banished, the veil restored. For now. Resolution, Elara's final reflection. The first light of dawn was breaking through the window, casting a warm, golden glow over the room. Elara sat at her desk, writing in her journal, her hands steady despite the exhaustion etched on her face. She looked tired, but there was a peace in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "The battle is over, but the scars remain," she wrote, the pen gilded smoothly across the paper. "I've faced the darkness and emerged on the other side. The veil is still there, just as thin as ever, but for now, it holds. And maybe, just maybe, we can all sleep a little safer tonight." Elara closed her journal and looked out the window, the soft light of a new day washing over her. The weight of her journey still hung over her, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to relax. The darkness had been beaten back, and she had earned this moment of peace. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the photograph of her parents, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She wasn't sure who she was thanking them, herself, or perhaps something greater, but the words felt right. Turning back to her desk, Elara placed the photograph next to her journal. She had come so far, faced so much, but she knew this wasn't the end. The veil between worlds was thin, and there would always be those who sought to cross it. But she also knew she wasn't alone. There were others like her, seekers who would stand against the darkness, no matter the cost. Thank you for joining me on this journey. The veil between our worlds may always exist, but as long as we stand together, there's nothing we can't face. If you've been with me through this series, you know that the unknown is always closer than we think. But with every discovery, every truth unveiled, we grow stronger. So if you haven't already, make sure to like this video and subscribe. There may be more mysteries ahead, and I wouldn't want you to miss a single one. Thank you for watching. Stay curious, stay brave, and always question what lies beyond the veil.